Good afternoon, guys, and welcome to the podcast. Today, I've got Giovanni, the joyful medium, come on to the podcast to share her insights and expertise. She's got a very fascinating journey from the WWE into her role as a psychic medium and how she has developed these abilities to help clients. I'm really fascinated in the spiritual realm, and so I'm really happy to have her on the show. So, Joy, welcome.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah. So briefly introduce yourself and we'll get right into it.
Introduce myself. I'm Joy Giovanni. I go by Joyful Medium. My primary work these days is as a medium and podcast host myself. I work one-on-one with clients and also in a group capacity. I don't know what else you want me to say about me. That's pretty much what I'm up to these days.
Yeah. So we'll dive right into it. Journey, can you share your transition from the entertainment industries, especially WWE, to your role as a psychic? That's a shift. What were the moments that led you to go down this path?
Actually, I did about an hour-long podcast episode about this on my podcast, so I'll try to condense it and give you just the Cliff Notes version of it. Essentially, I was an actor working in Hollywood. I was SAG act, and working with the WWE was a role that I was offered and got. So that's something that happened as part of my career. It actually was often in these types of settings and in speeches and speaking, we talk about the hero's journey, right? Those climbs that we make as human beings and then the big falls and what comes after. And that's part of that story. I really gave myself over to that career. It wasn't necessarily the direction I saw myself going. Sometimes that's how careers unfold and you take the opportunities that are given and you might end up in a different trajectory than you imagined. And that's what was happening for me. And to look from the outside, you could easily think that I was on top of the world. I was working on international television every week, often in front of massive live audiences, sometimes the size of the Staples Center or the Tokyo Dome. So it could look like my career was on this amazing trajectory with everything going really well. What most people didn't realize is that at the time, I had 2 small kids and I had a marriage that was failing. And while everything in my professional life might have looked great from the outside, in my personal life, things were not going well. And that was really exacerbated by this call I received one day from my management when I was in WWE. I was actually had suitcase next to the door, ready to go to the airport, and got this call saying it's not personal, it's just business. And my contract was being ended. I was being released from my contract, is the way they say it, with a group of almost 50 other people. And shortly after that, my whole life came crashing down. My marriage imploded. I lost the house that I had just bought. I was taking care of several other people, and all of that came crashing down. That left me with some big choices to make and a new direction to find. Before I had started acting, I actually entered into that acting world through fitness. I was a personal trainer. I was a trained and licensed massage therapist. I actually was training as a holistic health practitioner. The way it works in acting and entertainment, you may know, Chris, once your contract is done, you're back to pounding that pavement of auditioning. They don't care what time your kids get to school. They don't care what else you have going on. So before long, I stayed in that field for a little while, but before long, it became evident that was going to have to choose between all of this auditioning and seeking work or being a full-time mom. And being a mom was just the more important thing to me. And so I returned to wellness and massage therapy. And it was through that vein of wellness that I really came around to studying all of the intuitive gifts and eventually mediumship.
Yeah, really fascinating. And one thing I was talking with one of the previous guests, and we often see this is basically on the outside, everything looks perfect. And then on the inside, there's all these problems. How do people get aligned with this outer versus inner world? Because a lot of times on social media, it's like you have this picture perfect, but then behind the curtain, it's like this totally different story. How do you get into alignment?
I think a lot of times this is what we're talking about when you're hearing people that are in this kind of woo-woo type work talk about healing. It's often reframing or re-understanding patterns and programs and things that are taught to us, sometimes very overtly and sometimes very softly and subconsciously, just through our cultural experience, the country of origin we're from, the community groups we're from, the family that we're from. That really starts to dictate, even as a kid, how much permission we have to share. Are we hiding things going on in our family? Often it's, oh, those things we don't talk about in public, or have to give a good appearance, right? Or how things look from the outside. So we really are, many of us, most of us, marinated in this understanding it just as part of our culture from a young age. So really the way to break that cycle or start changing things for ourselves is just starting to look at our lives. Are we the same person out in the world as we are in our friendships, in our private life? Are there big secrets that we're withholding within us? Not that we have to share all of our most private, intimate secrets, but are we feeling like we get to be ourselves everywhere we go in the different aspects of our life or not? So it starts with just the noticing.
That I found fascinating in your bio was you say growing up you were sensitive and you sensed things from a young age and you resisted it. Talk about that process and how it led you to, developing your intuition and Reiki and working with chakras and energy and focusing your intuition.
Sure. I really feel like so many of us have some sort of innate understanding of energy to some degree. Often, if you think about in traditional business meetings, we might hear someone say, oh, there was great energy in that meeting today. Or, you know what, I don't know. I just don't feel like that person was hearing me. It's the energy of what they're giving off or what we're perceiving with those senses that are outside of our traditional five senses. So we all have some of that in us. And often from a young age, there are things that just happen or that we're aware of, especially for me, that I just didn't do that math and put two and two together until much later. Looking back, I realized, oh, okay, I did at the age of, I had language before I was a year old in full sentences, which is already unusual. And I was articulating, seeing people and talking to people and playing with people. And at the age of 2 and into 3, I actually remember some of those people that I was seeing. And it wasn't something that I necessarily made a big deal about. I just, there's a specific house my family lived in at the time, and there was a room at the end of the hall, and I would pass that room as a kiddo, and I would see a woman sitting in a rocking chair near the window, and something in me knew she wasn't here in the same way that you and I are here, in the same way that my parents were here, but I could still see her or understand her to some degree, and I just avoided that room. And I did. So it was little things like that for me. I lost someone very significant in my life when I probably would have been about 5. And from the time this person passed away, I just knew that I could still feel the love of her around me, the essence of her. I could receive signs from her. No one technically taught me this. It's just something I knew and started doing. And I have a very specific sign in the world that I set up for her from the time I was 5 years old, and I receive it all the time in different ways. So it's in the little things like that, but it's just not something I really ever necessarily questioned.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because, like I said, I'm like an intuitive and empath. I'm not a medium. I haven't developed to be able to do professional, but it's interesting. I could remember like loved ones passing away. Like, you remember I was standing this place and doing this thing, and all of a sudden this wave of emotion, like this feeling. And then, it turns out later, kind of these things. What's the difference between being psychic and being a medium? And is there a distinct line? And how do people, and where does intuition play into this?
That's a great question. I want to just quickly touch on something that you mentioned, which is, I feel like, really important for people to know. Now, a medium, and I'll go into the differences in just a second, but essentially I'm communicating with other people's loved ones. But I always love to highlight, just like you said, you've had loved ones that passed away and you could still feel that rush of emotions or love. We all have the ability to sense, feel, receive signs from our own loved ones. That's something that we all have access to. We all have that emotional connection with them. And even if it's someone we didn't know in our lifetime, or perhaps they passed away when we were very small, we still have the ability to connect with, communicate with our own loved ones. as long as you know me or anyone knows me, you'll hear me complain about the languaging because the language doesn't quite match the mystical experience of it. So it's not going to be your loved one standing next to you talking in your ear in communication style the way we experience it, but you will lightly sense them around, or a memory of them will pop in kind of out of nowhere, and you can still receive signs from them. So I think it's just important to highlight you don't have to be a medium to communicate with your own loved ones. They certainly hear you and receive all the love and intentions you send from your heart to them. Now, the difference between a psychic and a medium. So psychic and intuitive, those words for me are interchangeable. One of the challenges in this work is that it's not like the medical system where there's a standardized language of what things mean. It's very gray in the languaging. So for me, in the way that I'm trained and the way I identify it, psychic and intuitive are really interchangeable based on what word someone likes in there. And the other misconception about that word psychic or intuitive is because of media, often people believe that the intention of it is about predicting the future, and it's not. It's about understanding ourselves, the options available to us, the emotions that we may be shoving down or hiding from ourselves about something so that we can make the best free will choices now to set up those future experiences and put us on that path, right? So essentially, it's not that different, the difference between a psychic reading and a mediumship reading, for example. So psychic really is dealing with the energy here and now. And if I'm reading for someone like you, for example, it's me blending the energy of my soul with the energy of your soul. So everything I'm learning about you is from your soul, from your energy, from your aura, from your field. When I'm working as a medium, essentially it's the same thing that's happening. It's just I'm blending the energy of my soul with a soul who's no longer in a physical body. So someone who's discarnate. So we're all a soul in a human body, or on the other side, not in a human body. And mediumship is me blending my soul with someone who's no longer in a body. The type of mediumship I practice is called evidential, which essentially means that I like loved ones, people on the other side, to share some specific details about themselves so that the person that's there to hear from them can understand and recognize them. So I'm working with them to discern details about their personality, their memories of their life. Perhaps they're wanting to give their opinion about something going on in their loved one's life who's still here. So that's basically the difference between psychic and mediumship. There's a part B to that question. What was it? Oh, where does intuition come in there? Intuition is really part of the psychic work, but just like I was saying, we all have that ability to connect with our own loved ones on the other side. We all have intuition as an innate part of us. It's just a part of who we are. We often think of it as the sixth sense, which is actually a group of senses just outside of our physical, tangible five senses that we use all the time, often unknowingly to us. If you think about a great example of that sensing energy is, have you ever been standing in the line at a grocery store and all of a sudden you just become aware, like, oh, someone's standing too close behind me, and you can feel them behind you even though you don't see them? They've entered your auric field, your personal space bubble, and so you're energetically aware of them even though your physical eyes might not be seeing them. So we're sensing energy all the time.
And it's really interesting because what you really described is, because I love how you described it's not being right or wrong or predicting the future, but it's about feeling and sense impressions and signs. For me, it's a lot of times I see a lot of feathers. I know there's like the universe is, saying everything's okay. The other thing is you talk about this protection and boundaries because, like, for example, like I can get off the plane in Hawaii, feel extremely like relaxed and comfortable. I come back to Los Angeles and there's this chest tightness and there's this rush, like at the airport, like there's nobody, but you can feel this, like this rush, this pressure, this need to like, and so when you're dealing with energies and different entities, how do you protect yourself? And, this may be even in real life, like people that are like, you can sense like somebody's a dark or manipulative. How do you put up boundaries in these situations?
I think for me, that's almost two separate buckets to look at. So as far as that quote unquote protection, in my experience, all of the challenging energies, the dark energies, they all belong to this side. None of that's on the spirit side. That's all here in our world Our negative human emotions are the ugly things that people do, for example, war, disagreements, those type of things. That's all of this world. The spirit side doesn't have any of that. Those people have already left all that behind and are on that more evolved is not really the way to say it, but that more positive end of the emotional spectrum, because those challenging emotions are created by this illusion of separation. We feel alone. We feel stressed. We feel like money is important, right? So it's that illusion of separation from all that is, from creator energy, whatever word you like in there, that creates those emotions on the more challenging end of the emotional spectrum. Fear, sadness, anger, all of that. So really, that's part of our human experience. It's one of the things we're here to experience. So it's okay to become aware of it. We have all come across people in our lives, I'm sure, that maybe aren't the best intentioned people, or maybe just in that phase of their life are not a healthy individual. That's just normal human boundaries. You don't have to engage with someone who is of a negative mindset, for example, or just think about if you've ever had that person in your office who is really negative all the time and just drains the energy all the time and always has something to complain about, never a positive word, never an upbeat, a woe is me type character, right? You can create boundaries just by choosing how, when, and if you engage with them, to what degree, and how much you're willing to take those tough emotions. Do you just have that quick interaction and then you leave that feeling there with them? Or are you going to, as an empath, take that on, let your emotions subconsciously or unconsciously match theirs, bring you down, is how a lot of people feel it, and then you're down for the rest of your day? That's a choice. We get to choose to manage our own energy and our own emotions day to day, sometimes hour to hour. And that's a version of boundaries. We don't often think of it that way, but it's, does anyone in your sphere that you come into contact in a day-to-day way, are you giving them the power or the permission to change the mood you're in that day, right? Just because we have a tough interaction doesn't mean we have to let it send us in a mood spin for the whole day. That's our personal boundary. Now, when we're talking about like an energetic boundary, as far as spirit people talking to me all the time, for example, because it's an agreement to communicate, I'm moving my awareness to their soul just as well as they're moving their awareness to my soul. So we are both agreeing to communicate. So it's not like this barrage of unwanted communication all the time. And the other thing to remember is we all have spirit guides. So if there's something to keep us safe from energetically, wouldn't that be their role, really? It really has to do with where we are in our own emotions. You said something really interesting, this idea of when you're in Hawaii, you feel very relaxed and very at peace. And then when you get off the airplane in LA, immediately you're feeling stressed. I might challenge you to explore whether that is more about your conscious or unconscious emotional association with those places, because I've known people, for example, who served in the military who had very tough experiences in Hawaii, let's just say, and they might not feel so relaxed and at ease when they get off that plane. That might bring up stress for them. I have a friend from South Africa who, when he got off the plane in LA, felt overjoyed. This was his dream, right? It actually, these little emotions or feelings, like you're saying, discomfort, stress, you can feel, I'm from Boston, it's definitely a different energy in the vibe there, right? It's very intense, very rushed. And it's really more about what is that triggering in our own feelings. That's what to explore. Is it triggering an old pressure that maybe when you get off that plane in LA, you're stepping into that achiever version of Christopher who feels, oh, okay, I gotta meet these standards. I've gotta return these calls. That's more a belief that you've accepted within yourself. Do you know does that make sense the way I'm explaining it?
Yeah. It's really interesting because, and I'll give you an example, like if I'm walking in New York City, like downtown Manhattan, and just like that Fifth Avenue or the big crossroads, and you can just feel that energy, that pulse, right?
Yeah.
Or if you go to places like, if you go to place like New Orleans, or just places like where there's a lot of trauma, you can, like, what I'll feel is that this tightness in my chest, like this, and my heart will start palpitating.
Yeah.
It's like these dark, like these, I don't want to call them haunted, but they're like dark energy, like where you go to Las Vegas, where you go to the strip and it's like a lot of weird, what, again, not weird people, but just like weird energies. You can sense it. It's just, so it's just, It's interesting.
Humans create residual emotion, residual energy. There's an experiment that one of my mentors, two of my mentors actually do, where they have someone, they leave the room, they have a student sit in a chair at the front of the room. They don't know who it's going to be. Any student goes and sits for a couple minutes, returns to their seat, and then teacher comes back in, sits on that same chair, and does a full reading about the person's energy, not knowing which of 50 students it is in the room. So our energy does leave this residual emotion, energy in a place. And that's why a place that's had lots of traumatic happenings, for example, it leaves a lingering heaviness. It's the emotions and the actions that have taken place there. Something really important. Obviously, you're very energetically sensitive, and these are great examples of how we are sensing and feeling energy, or the vibe, a lot of people say now, in a day-to-day way. But we as human beings in these bodies, we have the discernment and the ability to decide what energy we want to tune to or match. I'm going to give you an example. So there was a time a handful of years ago where I was hospitalized for a week. I had a challenge going on with my lungs. I was having respiratory failure, and I wasn't really telling people outside of my immediate family that this was happening. And a friend who was in this woo realm, found out about it and sent me a very lovely message with good intentions, but was saying, "Oh, are you having a hard time because there's all that heavy energy and sadness and fiddle?" Well, I hadn't considered that because I was so exhausted I could barely stay awake. But then once that suggestion was given, oh yeah, I was aware of all that heaviness and all that sadness, and hospitals can be very tough places with a lot of loss. And then suddenly I remembered, okay, the way I say it in the work is I'm senior in my space. I get to decide what I'm focusing my attention and my awareness on. So if there's all this trauma and tragedy in this hospital, that's true, but there's also love here. There are these doctors and nurses and staff members across the board who are here giving their love, who are doing their very best, who care so much. There are prayers and love and good thoughts being flooded into this place. So if I can feel and sense this heavy vibration, certainly I can tune to this lighter, loving, good vibration. And so that's what I did. I tuned my energy and allowed myself to tune into that flow of love, rather that flow of challenge. So even if we're in a place that feels really tough, or having an experience that feels really tough, we want to validate and honor those emotions. We don't want to bypass them. But if it's like you're on a trip to New Orleans and you're feeling like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of heaviness here, well, also remember how much joy there is when people are playing the band parades down the street, for example, those wedding marches. Think about all of the celebration there. Think about how much the people of New Orleans came together during Hurricane Katrina and how much love is there. And see if you can shift your awareness to tune to that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And you're actually the first medium or psychic or just spiritual person that, because a lot of the people they're coming is like, yeah, there's these energies coming at me and I've got to do, and I've got to protect myself, or I've got to meditate or use crystals. But I like how you're describing it's like you can have this conscious awareness, or people that drain your energy, like these energy vampires, like you talk about energy tools to consciously choose your vibration. You're the first one that's really,
Oh, wow.
yeah. So it's,
Love that. I'm glad I'm getting to share something new with you guys.
yeah. We know we have around 8 minutes remaining. And one thing is, what is evidential mediumship? And then just talk about how you plan to use your work. And can anybody be a medium or start to develop their gifts?
This is a great question. So like we were touching into earlier, everyone has intuitive gifts, which means everyone has psychic gifts. So everyone can hone that and start to work in that space. Mediumship's a little different. Now, something I like to highlight, the old way that they used to say it is you're either born a medium or you're not. The way I understand it, and if you ask me in 10 years, I might understand it differently because I am always a work in progress too. But just because a gift hasn't manifested in our understanding yet doesn't mean it's not somewhere in the potential of our soul. So for many years, I would have said, I'm not a medium. I don't even believe in that. I don't think it's real. I don't understand it. But then as I did my emotional growth, my personal development, my own healing of those traumas in my own just human life, and started refining and understanding the energy, the chakras, the Reiki, all of that, the healing side of it, it started to open up. It's not really the right way to say it, but it started to become more available to me. And then all of a sudden, I had already been training in the psychic side and in the energy healing side for a while. I was doing a Reiki session with a client in private practice, and suddenly I could gently sense a person standing next to me. I knew their gender, I knew their relationship to my client, and I could say a couple details about them. And at that point, I had made this agreement with my guides that whatever you give me, whatever information I perceive or understand about my client when I'm working with their energy, I'm going to say it to them. So I was having this little kind of argument inside of, oh, I don't want to say this. I don't want to say that I'm aware of this person. This is weird. This is their grandma. I don't want to offend them. But I said it and it was right. And it happened with a few different clients that had been with me a long time that I trusted and felt safe that they wouldn't be offended if I said these things to them. So that kind of let me know, okay, I want to explore this. Do I have this? Do I not have this? Is this okay for me to be doing? I still wasn't even sure about whether it was good or bad or where it came from. I had to work through all of that too. Those are the types of emotions that can, I don't want to say hold us back, but that we get to work through to have a deeper understanding of ourselves and more acceptance of these gifts. So I would say for anyone curious, just start working with the piece that you're curious about. Often it's breadcrumbs that will lead us from one modality to another. I can't tell you how many mediums I've met in the last 10 years that have some version of energy work that they've trained in at some point, whether it's theta or Reiki or any of the versions of energy work. So often we become interested in one area, we explore it, and then just let it breadcrumb you to the next thing. Evidential mediumship, there's lots of types of mediumship, which I didn't know before I entered into all this work. Evidential mediumship really just means I'm largely talking to people on the other side, moms and dads and kids and grandparents and siblings, and I like them to share some specific details about themselves so that my client can recognize them. I feel like it's really difficult if you see a medium and they say, oh, it's a woman, she loves you, she's proud of you. It's okay. That could be anybody that I've known perhaps, but it's very different for someone to say, oh, I have this woman here. She feels like a grandma. I know that you remember her having this very fancy, ornate tea set with little flowers on it, and she liked to drink her tea at the table every day with a little matching saucer. Do you have a woman like this? And then they'll say, okay, yes. And then we work from there. So it's just a different way of working. It's the way that I prefer to work because the theory with evidential mediumship is if I can understand these details about, and it's whatever they want to share. Some want to share details about their passing. Some don't want to share about their passing. So I just honor, I can't pull information out of them. It's whatever they want to share that I can receive. It's through that detail that they're giving that you, Christopher, could validate and say, yes, this is true about my person, or no, I don't know who that is. That then any messaging they want to give, any advice they want to give, any guidance they want to give, because they've already been able to validate, this is who I am. I have my memories. I know who I am. I know who you are. I understand the nature of our relationship, because probably a grandparent is going to talk different to me than like a child's going to talk to me, and they're going to give different information. So it's through that evidential detail, quote unquote, that then not only do we validate that they still exist, that they're still with us, that we can still communicate, that they still know what's going on in our lives, but we can take the additional guidance or like messages with a little more weight. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I feel like there's another part to that question too, but I lost it.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Oh, can anyone learn? Is that's what you were saying too? I think it's impossible to tell who's a medium or who's not a medium till we start exploring it. And the other little thing I want to share is the way my guides shared it with me once upon a time was it's like, in the US anyway, like playing baseball in your backyard. Some people only want to play on the 4th of July wiffle ball in their backyard with their family. Some people want to make it their whole life and train and become a minor league or major league player. Everyone can play to some degree, but it's someone who this work is not meant for or it's not on their soul's path. They wouldn't be interested to spend all day, every day doing this. Just like some people wouldn't want to be a physician all the time. It's very similar to that.
Yeah, interesting. I really enjoyed this conversation, and there's so many insights. And thanks so much for coming on and sharing your expertise, and keep up the great work.
Thank you. Is it okay if I share just one more tidbit?
Yeah.
I know that you had some questions about signs that we didn't get to. I actually have a free sign mini course. It's a 3-lesson mini course. It teaches people how to get signs from the universe. Like you were saying, sometimes you receive feathers as signs from the universe. It
Yeah.
teaches about the numbers 1 through 9 and gives a cheat sheet of what all those recurring numbers mean. So for people that see 1111, 444, what are they trying to communicate? You'll get that lesson. And then the third lesson is how to set up signs with your loved ones on the other side. Because so often we ask for a sign, and then I'll have people come in and be like, they're not giving me a sign. And I'll say, what did you ask for? And they're like, I don't know, nothing. But there's a way to set up a specific sign with your loved ones so that it's them for sure, and that they can validate that they're still with you. So you can get that on my website, joyfulmedium.com, right on the homepage. That's called Sign Magnet. It's totally free, and everyone's welcome to have it.
Interesting. Yeah. I think that answers my question. Is like sometimes I'll ask for signs and I don't get any information. And that's usually a sign to use your intuition and go. But really fascinating, and really keep up the great work.
Thank you.